86 Venezuelan citizens are said to be arriving in a matter of minutes at the Simón Bolívar International Airport in Caracas. They are being repatriated from Argentina. They are the latest group to choose to return home after experiencing xenophobia and exploitation in places like Peru, Ecuador, Brazil, and Argentina. The return to the Homeland program has 3 phases: registration, logistics to bring them back, and reinsertion. The Venezuelan migrants set off from Buenos Aires earlier in the day. They are the latest of almost 3,000 who have been repatriated under this program. The plan, ordered by President Nicolás Maduro, has been active for 2 weeks. Many have criticized the poor living conditions and the exploitation that they face while abroad.
Here I have worked since 8:30 in the morning until 10:30 in the evening. You are giving 1 hour for lunch and you work for 14 hours every day. I only had half Sunday to rest. I worked like this for 6-7 months.
It is hard because my initial plan was to bring my family, but then it gets hard, and at the end you need to choose between being a migrant or your family. So returning is the only way to be with them.
Colombian authorities have confirmed the release of 6 soldiers by the National Liberation Army, or ELN. The rebel group had said they were holding soldiers as part of efforts to restart peace talks with the new government. This comes a week after the ELN freed 3 other soldiers. The government of right-wing President Iván Duque has said the group must free 19 detained people before it will resume dialogue. The last round of talks were held in Cuba early in August. President Iván Duque spoke about the recent release.
I am delighted that there are people who are returning home today after suffering the tragedy of kidnapping. And I say before the court of public opinion, if there is a genuine will for peace, the government will be there, but a genuine will for peace begins with the release of those abducted who are still deprived of their freedom. This group must tell us precisely what is the condition of these people and when they will return to their homes.
Duque also claims that he will honor the peace agreements signed with the FARC, but he won't tolerate anyone trying to take advantage of the situation.
In relation to the agreements signed at the Cologne Theater and their implementation, I have said that we will honor to our commitment so that those who have entered into a process of demobilization, disarmament and reintegration can do successfully, beginning a life of respect and peace. But
the National Liberation Army also commented on the releases.
We are that small, underestimated problem which has grown and proven itself to be alive and standing, and with some real changes, eager for a different and better society. Our action is part of a campaign to make visible and denounce the persecution and suffering that the Colombian state and its military and paramilitary forces are inflicting on lower and
Labor unions and social groups in Argentina are continuing their protest against the austerity measures of President Mauricio Macri. Thousands of people have blocked the main avenues of Buenos Aires. Protesters are angry about budget cuts in public services, which are severely affecting low-income Argentines. The inflation has risen to 31% and it is still climbing. People have to pay more for transportation and electricity as public utility subsidies have also been slashed.
It's an uncertainty to know day in, day out how you are going to get by because it's getting worse. Every day you find yourself with worse things. Then you ask yourself, how can I feed my children today? What can I feed them tomorrow? If it continues like this, the truth is we are worse off every day.
The Workers' Party in Brazil has a new presidential candidate, less than a month to the presidential election.
The Workers' Party handed over the presidential candidacy to Fernando Haddad. He will replace former President Luis Inácio Lula da Silva in the electoral race. Hundreds of people gathered in Curitiba to support Haddad and to protest the decision of the judiciary not to allow Lula run.
Haddad will continue Lula's project. He will build a better country for all of us, a country with public policies that takes into account the black community in universities, that brings back the housing project. He will promote policies to take care of us, different from the government of Michel Temer.
An act to denounce that Lula suffers a persecution process and that the justice of Brazil has not taken the honest decision to keep Lula da Silva as candidate. Through a letter read by one of the founders of the party, Lula indicated Haddad as his candidate.
No suppressor can be bigger than the people. That is why our ideas will reach everybody through the voice of the people, higher and louder than the lies of global. That is, I want to ask all of you that would vote for me, vote for Fernando Haddad for President of the Republic.
Fernando Haddad has reaffirmed Lula's innocence and called the PT and its militants win October's election.
It's time to go out to the streets with our heads held high and win this election. We're going to win this election for Lula, for the Workers' Party, and for the Communist Party of Brazil, for social movements and for Brazil. Brazil deserves this victory. We're not going to give up.
Social movements are now facing a new battle as they have to campaign in less than a month.
We are facing a historical moment and people know it. We work and fight for Brazil and connect our people to Latin America.
Haddad represents Lula, represents social movements, represents union movements. We are going to support this campaign. There is time to lose. We are going to vote for Haddad.
Fernando Haddad is now expected to build a popular project that gives power to the people. As Lula said, now the new presidential candidate will have to represent him and represent all Brazilians.
And some new developments over the last few hours in Costa Rica, as the police have broken into the National University to disperse students that were taking part in an indefinite general strike. The students and workers want changes to a tax reform, but the government is refusing to negotiate. Earlier, our correspondent in San Jose, Fernando Francia, sent this report on the third day of the strike.
It's been an intense third day of its indefinite strike, with a mass demonstration by workers from the public sector who are seeking to negotiate revised fiscal reforms with lawmakers. Their message is that talks are needed. However, the government says that there will be no talks until the strike is called off. So far, there is an agreement between the two sides, so the protest will continue for an indefinite period.
Coming up, more stories. We'll be back.
In a world infested by inequalities, abuse of power and injustice, the American journalist Abby Martin covers the struggle for fundamental rights worldwide, deep into the search of files which uncover the empire's strategies through our screen and web platform in English. The Empire Files with Abby Martin. Tuesday, only on Telesur.
Welcome back. Chileans have paid tribute to the victims of the dictatorship with a memorial at the National Stadium in Santiago. They remembered the 45th anniversary of the military coup against late President Salvador Allende. The Olympic National Stadium became the main detention and torture center during the dictatorship of Augusto Pinochet. The 17-year-long regime left more than 3,200 people dead and around 38,000 were tortured.
As former prisoners, we have an ethical and moral duty to keep the memory alive and keep the record on everything that happened.
We have to remember. We have to remember something that hit us very hard in the country and is something too important in our history. We have to remember, and that's why I came here.
Thousands of people from indigenous communities in Guatemala took to the streets on Wednesday. Demonstrators protested the decision of President Jimmy Morales to expel the International Commission Against Impunity from the country. They are saying this only protects pro-government forces and congressmen from the ruling party. 60 social movements have joined the protests. More than 2,000 police and army have locked down the center of Guatemala City amid these protests. Demonstrators denounced Morales' decision to deploy a section of elite soldiers of the army specialized for anti-terrorist operations. Our correspondent in Guatemala, Santiago Botón, explains.
30 to 40,000 people from the 48 areas of the Totonicapán region have been peacefully protesting against the government of Jimmy Morales, and especially against impunity and injustice. The peaceful protests are concentrating in at least 4 strategic points of the Inter-American Highway that connects the Guatemalan capital with the South Mexican border. During these latest days of protest, all the different groups have included their demands and joined together in calling for the resignation of Jimmy Morales and to advocate for the continuity of the International Commission Against Impunity in Guatemala.
Desde los kilómetros 170 a 187.
That was Santiago Botón from Guatemala. Since 2016, Honduras reported 266,000 orphan children. Out of them, 51,000 were orphans due to the death of the mother. This means the minors are in social risk and they don't have any protection by government authorities.
It's estimated that for each murdered mother, there are 3 orphan children. Most of them live with a family member who in many cases has no capacity to attend or assist them economically.
So we see that these children are totally abandoned. This leaves grandparents and aunts in charge of them, even though they really can't take care of them. So this creates a whole bunch of problems.
The testimony of these children, who have neither mother nor father, indicate how little by little they get to the streets.
I sleep in the streets like garbage, as well as all the others that have been here with me. We eat out of garbage, whatever the police gives us. We watch cars and do whatever core we can do here in the streets.
The prosecutor's office says the institutions responsible for caring for these children do not have sufficient resources to give them proper protection.
We would have to understand that this is a situation that should generate policies to increase the budgets of the governing institutions. In this case, currently the Direction of Childhood, Adolescence and Family does not have the appropriate budget to give satisfactory response.
The Honduran childhood crisis is alarming. Violence and poverty create other social problems within orphanages.
It is very serious because the access to schooling is low in Honduras. Still, almost half of the children do not go to school. It is serious because almost a fourth of infants is undernourished. This means that out of 100 children under 5 years old, 23 suffer malnutrition.
According to the organisation Quality of Life, in 12 years, over 15,000 minors became orphans because their mothers were murdered.
It has been 20 years since the case of the famous 5 Cuban citizens who were arrested by the United States for spying. The group known as the Miami Five was convicted with a life sentence, but human rights organizations campaigned for the case to be appealed. By 2014, all of them were freed after a prisoner exchange agreement was reached between Cuba and the United States. Street vendors in Cuba are bringing back the century-old tradition of the pregón. The pregón is the art of singing humorous and rhyming songs about their products. This tradition has made a comeback with a sound such as reggaeton, dancehall, and electronic music. Cuba's pregoneros are positive that their music is helping them stand out. An island-wide state of emergency has been declared in Dominica from midnight September 12 to noon on Friday, September 14. A curfew will be in effect.
As a result, a big part of our preparation is a rather aggressive dredging campaign to clear our rivers and ravines. From last year into this year, we have done a significant amount of work in preparation for events like this. And as we all know, preparation is key.
Trinidad and Tobago could finally be adopting the Caribbean Court of Justice, CCJ, as its final court of appeal. Although the CCJ's headquarters are based in Trinidad, the country has long avoided even debating its adoption. Prime Minister Keith Rowley says that this will change next year. We'll take one last short break, but stay with us.
With developing events being presented through analysis. Our coverage transcends borders. With renowned journalist Walter Martinez.
Salud amigos, tripulantes de nuestra querida, contaminada y única nave espacial.
Dossier. Weekdays. Only on Telesur.
Y ponga usted las cámaras, señor director.
Welcome back. The Venezuelan Foreign Minister Jorge Arreaza has addressed the United Nations Council for Human Rights in Geneva, Switzerland. Our correspondent Eduardo Marin was there.
Here in Geneva, the Venezuelan Foreign Minister Jorge Arreaza has held meetings with representatives of different countries, and he spoke to this United Nations meeting and said that Venezuela is not experiencing a humanitarian crisis, but rather an economic crisis caused by the United States and the European Union. He also sought help from allied countries to vote against the new report on fundamental rights and freedoms in Venezuela to be presented at the end of the month.
Dozens of Palestinians have been demonstrating against the planned demolition of a village in the West Bank. An injunction to stop the demolition of the village of Khan al-Ahmar has expired, and the more than 180 inhabitants are threatened with imminent eviction. The Israeli Supreme Court proposed moving the families to a site 9 kilometers away, but most of the families refused.
Of any procedures and any steps of the occupation of Khan al-Ahmar can be done by the Palestinian will, which enables them to face the Israeli machines and prevent the demolition. We are staying on the land of our ancestors and we will not leave this place. All these lands are property of the Palestinian people and we will continue on the national struggle until freedom and independence.
The United Nations has described the situation in the Gaza border as catastrophic after 11 years of economic siege. It also warns that Washington's decision to stop assistance to Palestinian refugees would create more misery.
If we compare to developing countries, we realize that we are creating in Palestine, and particularly in Gaza, conditions similar to those in lesser developed countries. It's like what is happening in Somalia, where there is a lack of access to safe water. So, in a sense, we are economically isolating Gaza. This will prove extremely challenging to Palestine's development.
It is the responsibility of Israel and the responsibility of the international community to promote development in the occupied Palestinian territory. It's actually called for by the international law.
South Sudan's president has signed a peace deal with the rebel leader. He signed an agreement with the SPL-MIO rebel group, ending a 5-year civil war. The conflict has killed at least 50,000 people, mostly civilians, and displaced about 2 million others. A previous peace deal made in 2015 fell apart 1 year later after fighting broke out between the government and the rebel groups. People in Ghana have been paying their respects to the former UN Secretary General Kofi Annan. The ceremony took place at the International Conference Center in Accra, ahead of Annan's state funeral on Thursday. Among the guests was his wife, Nane. After the ceremony, members of the public shared their fond memories of Annan.
He inspires a lot. That's why it motivates me to do a pen portrait so that it could honor him.
I worked with him for just 6 months and he went back to Geneva. He's a good man, he has principles, he's a brave and courageous man.
All I wish is may his soul rest in peace. Yeah.
We, the youth, also need to emulate that, also live, continue the legacy or continue where he stopped from. So to me, the world has really lost a great person.
China and Venezuela have reinforced cooperation strategies during a visit to Beijing this week by Vice President Delcy Rodriguez.
China and Venezuela have furthered their commitment on economic development, seeking mutual benefit and the creation of new markets.
This allows the consolidation of ongoing projects in Venezuela and the creation of new projects under the orders of President Maduro. Our cooperation with China will pave the way for the Venezuelan people.
As part of her work agenda, Vice President Rodriguez met with high officials from the Asian giant. She highlighted the work of both countries' national oil companies over the past 20 years. The president of China's National Oil Corporation says cooperation will only grow from here.
Cooperation between our oil industries has been good. We have the honor of saying we have gained many jobs and various economic benefits from it, not to mention friendship between our people.
Rodriguez praised the vision of late President Hugo Chavez of creating links between Beijing and Caracas.
He knew he was paving the way for a strategic relationship between the two nations. This was unprecedented, and President Maduro has continued this legacy. Our nations continue to consolidate our relationship for a better future.
Cooperation is being pushed through various meetings being held during the Vice President's visit. On Wednesday, she is set to meet with her counterpart, as well as the directors of the China's Development Bank.
And we have some last-minute news from our correspondent, Luis Tavera, who was at the airport in Caracas receiving the Venezuelans that are repatriated from Argentina. These are last-minute images from the airport as they arrive. Some of them have reported xenophobia and rejection from their countries. So with that, we end our news conference today, our news site, and we invite you to follow us on social media. We are on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Telesur English, I'm Carla Gonzalez. Thank you for watching. Here's our website where you can find everything that we've discussed today. And until the next time, stay connected to us.